Absolutely. And this town time for you, Tony, in terms of COVID-19, I mean, it doesn't totally shut down the operation. You still have horses in your barn. You're still training them and trying to plan as best you can. And now that you see some light at the end of the tunnel, what's the atmosphere like around Classy Lane stables these days?
Well, I mean, when an actual date was set for us to resume racing, and then certainly the qualifying schedule, it ramped up for sure. You could feel a little more of a vibe. People. I mean, a couple of Saturdays ago, the track was, busy. People getting ready, and not to say that they weren't in training most of the time. I mean, I think myself, I gave horses some time off, and I think a lot of other people did too. But we were all waiting and trying to wait and see what was going to happen. And once we kind of got a green light or an orange light, you could just feel a little more of a vibe and something to aim towards.
Yeah. Give us a sense for what your operation looks like now in terms of the number of horses and the mix between young and old, and how COVID-19 would have impacted just your overall approach the last couple of months.
So now we're down. We only have 15 horses, and in terms of a mix, we've got half a dozen 3-year-olds and a couple of babies, and the rest are just race horses. So the numbers are down pretty good for what we've been used to over the last 10 years. The COVID didn't affect me a lot, and the few that we were racing. I did have a couple of 3-year-olds that needed to probably start around March because they raced a couple times at 2 and a little bit unknown. But to start in June, I mean, it is what it is, and everybody's in the same boat. So it didn't affect me. I think if I had a bigger stable like I used to, then you'd feel it more financially. But it wasn't too bad for myself.
Joined tonight by Wally Hennessy and Tony O'Sullivan. Both come from different parts of the world. Wally, a native of Prince Edward Island, Tony, a native of New Zealand. And we're going to talk a lot tonight about their backgrounds and how they got to where they are today. Obviously, have some fun. We'll take a trip down memory lane as well and just chat about some other things. If you would like to leave a question or comment for the guys, we'd love to hear from you tonight as part of the broadcast as well. We'll have some trivia questions to get to, and as always, we're going to kick off the show with our poll question tonight and have a little fun with this one as well. Of these races, if you haven't seen one of these in person yet, which one of these three, or perhaps another, would you most like to see? Which one is the top of your bucket list? Is it A, the Elite Lop? Is it B, the Hambletonian? C, the Prix d'Amérique? Or is it a race other than those three? And submit your answers to us as part of the show, and we will recap the answer a little bit later on tonight. And again, we've got trivia questions that we're going to get to as part of the broadcast as well. So have a little fun and play along with us here this evening as part of the show. Getting back to these guys and how things all got started for them, I think we've got a photo to pull up here, Wally, and our producer, Curtis, who you know well, Curtis McDonald, able to dig this one up. And this is a long time ago. Wally, what are we looking at here?
Okay, just Greg, before I talk about, I got this on my mind. So before I talk about this photo, I know Curtis is he's also from Prince Edward Island, and I actually grew up around the block from his father and his uncles and his aunts and everything. And I know his father Freddie very well, and Gail, and I know Curtis puts this production together, and I've been watching it like ever since you guys have been on, and it's been great that you've had it on. But I just know that I don't think Curtis got a whole lot of his technology strategies or brains from the Prophet. I think it came from the dam side. So having said that,
I think you're right.
I think everybody will agree with that. But having said that, this here picture you're looking at now, guys, is that's my very first parimutuel win at Charlottetown Driving Park I think it was 1975. 75. I was still 18 years old. You had to be 18 in Atlantic Canada at that time in order to get a license. And I was still 18. As you can notice, the sulkies are a little different. My posture is very much different. I'm right over the butt of his tail, but that's about where everybody was then. And I consider that picture right there one of my finest moments. It was one of the biggest thrills I ever had in my life. That first lifetime win.
Yeah, it certainly had to be. And as you mentioned, it's so different to look back now. And it's probably hard to believe when you look back that, hey, that was me at the time. Can you point to a time? Do you know when your style would have changed in terms of how you sit on the bike and that type of thing? Or is it just a kind of a slow evolution over time?
Well, everybody has a different answer to that, but I'd like to think that I haven't changed much. I mean, the sulkies kind of make you. I don't lay out much, but I know a lot of people do, and it works for them, but it doesn't work for me. But the sulkies today, they're so far away from the horse, like that one there. You could see my hands were right over. I could pretty near touch the saddle pad.
Yeah.
But you're so far away, and the degree the degree of the shafts kind of it forces you to kind of sit back in the bike instead of forward. If you were to sit forward, your feet would almost come down out of the stirrups. So, as far as like if I how I changed, I don't know. I guess I I changed like everybody else. Like the horses got better, and you drove them a lot different. Like back in them early days, I could never drive horses the way I drive them today. Like that particular horse, my first win, um, I that mile, I cut the mile. My father was very mad after the race that I did that because the horse was noted. He was a bad toe sticker. That means like he'd undress himself, and I took a chance. But the horses today they're so much better. You can just drive them, and you can use them maybe 2 or 3 times in a mile. And I personally, guys, the driver gets way too much credit today. I think in the listen, the young fellas probably won't agree with this, but I believe in the older days you had to have a tad more talent. I'm not saying that the young fellas are not as good or better than we were in the younger days, but I think you had to be more of a strategist. Strategist, is that what you call it? Use strategy a
Strategist.
little bit
Yeah.
more in the old days, because if you might be the favorite, but you couldn't overdrive them or you would get beat.
Tony, you primarily have concentrated on training now for a number of years, but there was a time you did some driving as well. Was there a point where you wanted to drive in your career, or did you always think that training is inevitably what you would settle into?
No, I mean, so I came to New Jersey in 1996. Young 19-year-old that didn't really know anything. All I knew was American harness racing. They went fast, and it was exciting. We would see the advertisements for the stallions and such on the TV in New Zealand. So, I did that. I groomed and I worked for Paul Jessup, who was another New Zealand guy, old stretch, and I wanted to be a driver. Absolutely. I drove freehold and lands and drove quite a bit Yonkers. Ross Wolfenden was working with Stretch at that time, and he drove most of them, and then I would get to drive some. When I came up here with Ross Croghan's horses. I'd worked for him for a year or so, and I wanted to drive like most young kids. I mean, you want to go fast, you want to win races, and then I kind of realized early on that I wasn't going to get the support that was needed. I saw guys in their 30s that had that dream and they were struggling to make a living, and I just decided that that wasn't going to be where I was, supposed to be headed. So I was lucky enough to be assistant trainer for a couple good stables, and learned enough and had dealt with decent enough horses that I could go on with a reasonable amount of it. So it was more just looking around and seeing how tough it was. I didn't want to keep doing something for another 5 or 10 years and get of an age where you kind of can't do anything. So I decided to focus on training.
Well, many would say that was probably a wise decision, and it's not easy, I'm sure, at the time to kind of recognize that, but make that decision and that commitment to focus more on the training side. And safe to say it's worked out very well for you to this point in time. Wally, it was fun to look back to 1975, I think was what you said, that year that photo was taken. We're going to fast forward just a couple of years ago, and here you are winning for your career 10,000 career victories on this night. Now you've well surpassed that, but it was a milestone at the time. A trotter named Prince of Fame. What do you remember about that night and that race with that milestone in sight?
Yeah, I remember the night quite well, Greg. What happens when an owner or trainer or driver is reaching a milestone. It's kind of documented, and people are that you know about it, that you're getting close to them marks, or them milestones. And I think that particular night I still had to win like maybe 4 races or something. And he was either my last or second last driver of the night. And my daughter came over. She was about an hour or 2 away, and she had come over, which I told her not to that night. I didn't think I could win 4 races. I'm glad she did. But that horse, he was trained by Mickey McNichol. I had actually trained that horse myself a year or 2 prior, so I knew the horse. I put him on the front end, and he got the job done. And he wasn't. I don't think he was the favorite, but he was one of the favorites. It was a nice night. It was a great night for everybody. I had a lot of family there, a lot of friends there, and it felt good. But the numbers, you know how they go, Greg. I'm looking for 11,000 now, right? I'm not. I wasn't going to quit at 10, so let's keep marching.
For sure. Well, let's take a look back at that race, and then we'll get your thoughts on how it felt to join the very elusive 10,000 win club.
Center of the track, Prince of Fame on the move. The outside, My Reveneur. Also fired up 3 wide there at the opening turn for Santaramo as they trot midway around that turn. Got to pay to play. Looks intent of the top down at the inside for Wayne Henry. Prince of Fame. Hennessy there with the favorite. Still floating wide at that second spot. My Reveneur continues parked up at the outside of third. Past 8 seconds. Prince of Fame still trying to sprint past. Got to pay to play. So Hennessy will assume command here in the nightcap with Prince of Fame. My Reveneur up to apply immediate pressure on the outside for Santaramo. Got to pay to play. Still hanging in from a third. That's Stormont Dundas 4th. Leviathan is 5th. Undercover Bro trots back at the 6th spot in front of Certain Potential. The She Batters follows at 8th as Plato swings to the outside with Golden Tate. At the back markers, Cod House. The half mile was up in 57 seconds. Prince of Fame still on the point here. 3-5 favorite. Prince of Fame, he's been under steady pressure from My Revenue, who is yet to go away there on the outside a second. Got to pay to play. Gapping out at the inside third is Undercover Bro. Is on the move from 4th. He still has 4 lengths to make up. Stormont Dundas is saving ground in 5th. As Leviathan moves to the outside third up in the 6th spot. They trot at the far turn. Prince of Fame still the one to catch. My Revenue still inching into the outside. At the inside third. Undercover Bro is still tracking cover. He will now begin to move 3 wide as they turn for home. Stormont Dundas saving ground in fifth. Prince of Fame, the favorite with an eighth to go. Got a pay to play to the outside. Do a challenge second. Undercover Bro rallies up a late. Stormont Dundas has late trotted at the inside, but it's Prince of Fame, a Hall of Fame career that knows no bounds. Hennessy's in for win number 10,000 here with the favorite Prince of Fame in the nightcap. Stormont Dundas rallied for second, 157-2.
Career win, 10,000 and counting, Wally. And boy, it takes a long time to get there, and there's a lot of races that go into achieving a milestone like that. Let's go back a little bit in time. We showed your first win in Charlottetown, but it was another maritime track where you really made a name for yourself, St. John, New Brunswick Exhibition Park Raceway. Tell us about how you ended up moving over there, and what led to all the success you had there.
Yeah, yes, that's a good question there, Greg, because what happened was I was like 18 or 19 at the time. My father, as you know, had always operated a large stable home, and he was still driving at the time. And then I had an older brother, Jody, an excellent driver himself. He was driving at the time. And my other older brother, Dan, he drove a little at the time. So there was no, like the people that my father had the horses for, had them in his stable for him to drive, not for Wally to learn. So it kind of all, anyway, I was going to get out of the business. I was going to go work on the, what do they call it then, the tupper. And it was on dry dock over in St. John, New Brunswick. And I'd only been off Prince Edward Island like once in my life. And so I loaded up and away I went with the knapsack and $10. And I got on the boat. It was on dry dock. It wasn't on water. It was being repaired. And I lasted approximately maybe 4 hours, I guess. I said, this isn't for me. And I come down the gangplank, and I knew there was a racetrack in St. John, Exhibition Park Raceway. And I landed there, and at the time there was a lot of Islanders there. And I hooked up with, they got my career started going. The Whalen boys, Walter and Jimmy. And I actually hadn't drove that much at the time. And Walter got me a couple of drives. It was exhibition week, and Walter got me a couple of drives. So anyway, long story short, the following week follows up with Fredericton Raceway, where they have their special week. It's called their Fredericton Exhibition Week. And don't you know, Walter had a broken arm, and of course he couldn't drive. Jimmy had a suspension come due, and he had to serve the days, 3 days. He had appealed it, and he had to serve the 3 days. So they raced afternoon and night. They had about, I don't know how many horses we had, 30, 25, 30. And Walter said, "You're up. You're aboard." And so I said, "I'm not going. I can't drive all them horses." And he said, "Oh, yes, you can, and you're gonna." And he said, "I just want to tell you one thing." I said, "Yeah, what's that?" He said, "When they grab a hold of you, they're telling you something. Let them go." And that was just quite opposite of what my father used to tell me. My father used to tell me to conserve them and go easy with them. So that afternoon, I was swinging around the last turn for my driving triple, and I was ahead by about 10. And coming around the last turn, that's where we were stabled. So I was doing a little showboat, and I kind of put the lines up in the air, looking over at the boys, telling them how good I was doing. And then I commented, "Did I ever get it going over by Walter?" He said, "If I ever did that again in my life," he said, "or then for sure, or in my life, you'll never drive another horse from me ever again." So that was a good lesson. But anyway, yeah. I went back to Exhibition Park after that, and a couple of years later, I was a leading driver. So I don't know why, it just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah. And your wife Barb is from St. John, is she not?
Absolutely. That's where I met Barb, my wife, and I want to tell you, her father, Doug Caldwell, he was he was everything there. He was the Exhibition Park Raceway was it was run by an exhibition association, so it was like a nonprofit. He was on that board. He was the general manager. He was the race secretary, and he was everything. He did everything there, and he helped my career immensely. I guess a lot of the guys that were there at the time thought that was the only way my career was doing any good, is because I was dating the general manager's and race secretary's daughter. But I fooled them, didn't I? So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Anyway, I'm just joking a little bit about that. They were a little uptight about it, but not bad. So you know, things were going so well, you know, over a certain amount of time. I thought, you know, I had real good owners, and why not give Pompano and get away from the winners, go down to Pompano for one winner? And they were all for it because they wanted to go. They wanted to go down, and then that was it. I never left there.
The rest is history, as they say. Tony, we heard Wally's story about leaving PEI to go to St. John, which is what, about 3 hours geographically apart. But for you, as a youngster, to come all the way to North America, that had to be daunting. Describe maybe your early days in New Zealand. Wally talked about the guys that he looked up to, or guys that were big names in the Maritimes. Who were some of the big names that you would have worked with and looked up to in the New Zealand racing industry as a young kid?
Like I didn't come from a horse background per se. My dad was a at home, and so we had met people. Some of our good friends were horse trainers and farmers and stuff like that. So school holidays, I would switch my time between some standardbred training friends of ours, and then some galloping training friends they were also sheep farmers. So I just did that, a couple days or a couple weeks of each holiday. I had no intention of getting into the horse business. I actually wanted to be an Air Force pilot, is what I wanted to do. And when it came time to apply, I missed by about 3% in physics of getting in. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. The trainer in Palmerston North, which is a city I grew up in, Stephen Doody was his name. His nickname was Noddy. And he was, he had a sized team of probably 20 or 25. And obviously we knew him from being at the dad calling and at our local track and stuff like that. So I went and got a job with him. I worked there for, a few months, maybe 6 months. And then I went to Auckland and worked for Mark and Barry Purdon, who the Purdon name is synonymous with success and good horses. So I worked there for a while, but I was only young. I was about 18, and I got a little bit homesick, so I went back home to Mum's, and I went back and worked for Stephen Doody again. And then because I'd been away and I'd grown up a little bit, I realized that Auckland was the place to be if I wanted to stay in the racing business. So I went up and worked for another trainer called Bernie Hackett, who that's actually how I ended up in the States. He was a good friend of Paul Jessop's, and worked there for a little while. I lived with them. We trained on the beach a lot. And then one day I just, the North American bug kind of got to me, and a lot of other people had gone over and done well. And, as you know, in this business, once you start talking to people, you hear a lot about everybody and whatever. So I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm going to United States. And she said, when are you leaving? And I said, I'm leaving next week. And I jumped on a plane full of horses and flew Auckland, Hawaii, and then landed at Paul Jessop's farm, Crystal Brook, Colts Neck, New Jersey. I'll never forget it, actually. I didn't know what stretch looked like. And you guys would know, and Wally, you would certainly know because you would have driven for him over the years. But, here's a 18, 19-year-old kid in North America, and we were in a F-250 truck, which we would never have seen in New Zealand. And I jumped out, and there was a guy standing there in blue jeans, cowboy boots, a brown belt, and a green singlet with, with long hair, a Dutch boy haircut. And that was Stretch. So, introduced myself, and I was nervous as hell. And he introduced himself and told me the dorm room that I was going to be staying in, the 10 by 10 in the pool barn. And then he gave me $100 and went down to the local bar and had some dinner and a few beers. And I drank Budweiser because that's an American thing, and I'd never drank it before. And that was in April of 1996, and I've never drank it since. So got a little bit messed up on it, and now I still can't stand the taste of it.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's a great story, Tony. And back when you were in New Zealand, it's pre the days of everybody being on the internet and social media. How did you hear so much about racing in North America that it stoked that fire?
Well, it would have been, from memory, it would have been the trackside TV, which is similar to what you've done in the past, and Chad and Jason do, and then also in the the equivalent of the hoofbeats, the advertisement stallions. I remember seeing a picture of WRH, Deal Direct. You'd hear the announcer at the Meadowlands, and there'd be little clips and snippets and stuff, and obviously there was other people that had come over and done well. I mean, done well, and Nifelling and a bunch of younger kids that had gone to work for those guys too. So it was just more word of mouth, and certainly Facebook or text or Instagram or even email. Just word of mouth, and Bernie Hackett was the guy that really put me in touch, because he had been over to the States, for 6 months or so, and experienced it, and put me in touch with Stretch.
And we'll talk more about your eventual move to Canada a little bit later as well. I think some questions are starting to come in. We'll try and get to some of those throughout the show as well. Wally, getting back to you and your career, so many highlights, but I'm sure the big ones for you were induction to the Horse Racing Hall of Fame, both in the United States and in Canada. And here's a look at the ceremony in Canada. And this came from back in 2014. Describe the experience and what it means to be recognized among the very best to ever participate in your sport.
Listen, that picture there is very special to me. That's my daughter, Christy. She's presenting me with the ring there. All my family was there that night, and friends. They came from all different places. But it's very humbling, really, because I think all the guys, when you get inducted, and even after you're inducted, like that was a few years ago for me, you still don't even know for sure whether you're worthy to be in, be there with the people that are in there. But listen, it wasn't something I set out to do. I'm glad it happened to me, and they were, like you say, they were by far two of the biggest highlights in my career. But along the way, you don't. Everybody says this as well. You never do this alone. Family has to play a big part of what you do. You miss out on a lot of family occasions, and like I left Prince Edward Island, and I hardly even know any of my nieces or nephews or whatever, and even my brother's sisters. I left 35 years ago, so I've seen them since, but I've never been with them daily. But Barb and Christy have really put up with a lot with me. I'm not the easiest guy in the world. I'm pretty intense when it comes to the racing part of it. I take it seriously, and I think anybody that wants to succeed in anything, if you don't want to take it seriously, I don't think you'll never reach your goal. I don't think if you're not dedicated to what you're doing. But them two things were very, very special. The United States in Goshen, and then up there in Canada. Canada, especially, I'm a Canadian citizen. I come from Prince Edward Island. I think, Greg, who else is in from, Atlantic Canada, Prince Edward Island? There's George Callback, right? He's in the Canadian Hall of Fame, and who else from? Oh, Joe O'Brien. How could I forget him?
O'Brien.
Joe O'Brien's, and Joe O'Brien and I are dual from Prince Edward Island. So it's special. It is special. I mean, look at there's not many people in them, guys, and you're one of them. And my life never changed either way, either time. I mean, I'm still working today, and I don't feel any more special personally, other than that's an accolade I have, a notch in the belt or whatever. But I always try to do my best, whether it's a 4-claimer or open horse or stake race. I give everybody my best.
And still going strong. You mentioned it. You're still going, and to say that is a bit of an understatement, Wally. You're at an age where frankly, I think people would be expecting to see your numbers start to tail off a little bit, but that's not the case. Last year, you had your best year ever in terms of wins, 429, and your best driving average at 457. That's pretty remarkable. How have you been able to stay so good for so long?
Well, it's a pretty simple answer. There's a lot of answers to it, but you don't win 400 and some races, and you don't especially have a UDR of 450 unless you're every time you go out, you have a chance to win. If I went out, the last few years, for whatever reasons, the places I was going, I was getting the power. And that's what you need today. You need the power. And the reason why I'm keeping going, well, this is how I make my living financially. You got to make a living. And I think maybe the biggest thing with me, I don't know, maybe not the biggest, but one of, is the fear, the fear of failing. Like, I know it's coming to me. It's came to everybody, but I'm not, I don't think, I don't know how I'm going to accept it. I've asked a few of the guys how they've done it, the close guys. I'm not going to even say what they've said to me or their names, but they had been retired for a while when I asked them. But these last 10 weeks with me not competing is like, oh my goodness, I've never done that in my life. And you can ask Barb how I've been the last couple of months. Not the nicest fellow, not the happiest camper in the world. So anyway, that's kind of, I don't know how my career is keeping going. It's just I'm just going to keep showing up every day, and it's going to end. I know.
Well, it's remarkable, like you say, and when you get to a certain age, it's just human nature. Trainers like to start to, I guess, gravitate towards the younger guys, but in your case, like you say, that certainly hasn't been the issue. And at Pompano, especially, where you've been the kingpin for a long time, coming off that great year last year. Right now, let's go to our first trivia question of the night. And again, we urge you to submit your answers in our comments section. Tony O'Sullivan, one of our guests tonight, finished second 2 consecutive years in the Breeders' Crown Mares Open Pace. With which mare? So 2 consecutive years, Tony finished second in the Mares Aged Pace in the Breeders' Crown. Can you name which mare that was with? One of the many greats that have passed through Tony's barn over the years. And speaking of that, we're going to have a bit of a look at Tony's operation currently at Classy Lane. You're able to get some footage from there from earlier today, just to look at your stable and operation. Tell us about Classy Lane, Tony, for those who've never been there. It's one of the nicer training facilities you'll find anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Class C's always been second to none. I think it's probably 16 or 17 years old now, and there's been a lot of good horses go through there, a lot of big stables. The track is the main feature, I guess. It's a 7/8 mile track. The surface is very good, and they try hard to keep it as good as they can for us every day. The barns are great, and there's a swimming pool right there on the grounds. That's literally a 2 or 3 minute walk from whichever barn you're in. So it's just a good facility. The horses are happy, and you can get them ready there as fast as you need to go, type thing. So it serves everybody very well, I believe.
And great location as well, very central to all of the major tracks, especially
Yeah.
Mohawk Park as well. In terms of your operation, how many people do you have working for you currently?
I just have 3 people working for me now, and myself, so 4. When we had 60 or 70 horses, I had, I think, 15 employees. I probably had more employees than I have horses now. And then, when we had the New Jersey operation that went between 6 to 12 type thing, 2 or 3 more people. So just 3 people now, and a small number of horses, but it's okay. And you need numbers for backups for when things go wrong, but hopefully there's a little bit of quality in there.
Yep. And the game changes so much over time, right? And you and I would have first crossed paths in the mid '90s in New Jersey, and then I remember seeing you when you made your way north, and I think where you really put roots up here in Canada was when you were operating an arm of the Mark Harder stable, if memory serves me
Mm-hmm.
correctly, as
Yep.
his assistant.
Yep.
So how did that transition happen? I mean, what was it about Canada that made you say, you know what, I think I want to stay here full time?
So I came here in the summer of 1999. I was working for Ross Krogan, and we had half a dozen horses that came up for the Pacing Derby, the Slots Cup, a bunch of the other big races, the Grand Circuit stuff. So he sent me up, and I finished that summer out, and just decided to stay here. Probably the biggest reason, really, I mean, obviously at that time the slots program was just starting to boom, so the money was big. But because I was working for somebody, that didn't affect me, directly. So the biggest reason I stayed, honestly, was it felt a lot like New Zealand. The people were really nice. As you know, New Jersey it's a great place, and I still have a lot of good friends there. But it's a fast pace, and I just felt it was, time for a change. And usually when I felt it's time for a change, I've just gone ahead and done it, and it's worked out. So I ended up getting a job with Nat Vardy. He had just, I believe, ventured out on his own. Had a lot of really good horses. And then after about 2 years of that, Mark was Krogie's assistant trainer. And when he left him and went on his own, he got in touch with me, and we had some horses, or he had some horses for Brian Nixon and Aubrey Friedman that wanted to race at Mohawk and Woodbine. So he asked me if I would be interested in doing that. We started with 5, and over the next 2 to 3 years, we got to probably 30 odd, and it developed into something really, really good. So I just took a shot to run his stable, and it was probably one of the best things I did. It really helped as a stepping stone to what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years.
So eventually you make the decision and say, I think I want to do this on my own and operate my own stable. That was around 2004, I believe, 2005.
Yep.
And not long before you had a first home run horse, a trotter named Susie's Magic.
Yeah.
Just maybe talk about how she came into your care. I mean, she went through some really top barns before you got her. Bob Stewart had her, Jim Campbell had her for a stretch, and even Chuck Sylvester. How did she end up in your care?
I had developed a friendship with John and Carter Dewar of Peninsula Farms, and one of their very good friends was Lee DeVisser. And when Susie got sent up for the Brown, the elimination, I don't remember if I already had a horse for Lee. I don't think I did. But John and Carter must have recommended me, and yeah, she came up for the elimination and the final, and we got lucky enough to win it. And then, I think I had her for about another 3 years or so, and she was one of my favorites. She was very, very tough to train. She was a Dream Vacation mare, I believe, out of maybe an El Paso Cash brood mare. She was extremely aggressive and certainly had her quirks in her own ways, but I had a lot of fun with her, and she taught me a lot very quickly, because you had no choice. It was Susie's way or no way type thing, and that started a great relationship with Lee DeVisser, and then obviously, friends and associates of his, and Peninsula Farms connection. So she really really helped me. We won some other races. We won, I think, the Miss Versatility final at Delaware. She won in 52 at the Meadowlands, and probably a leg of the Miss Versatility. And I even drove her at Tioga and Vernon one year. Actually, the year I drove her at Vernon, we were walking to go in behind the gate, and she had a habit of kicking, and I had my foot down. Had it nice and relaxed, and she kicked me. I don't know how my ankle didn't break, but it sure felt like it broke. So she had her quirks, but I loved her, and yeah, she definitely helped me.
Yeah, when they're that good, I guess you learn to put up with that. Talk about the 2006 Breeders' Crown. That year it was held at Woodbine. You had to face two Bearcats in Pure Ivory and Passionate Glide that year. So going into the race, were you thinking, hey, we're racing for third at best, or did you quietly think that you might be able to win with the right trip?
I was probably at that point a little bit naive in terms of what we were racing against. I'm not going to go and say that we thought we would win the Breeders' Crown, but I certainly didn't think that she couldn't. Dave Miller he had driven her a lot, and obviously he drove her in the elimination, and he was quietly confident. The one thing he said after the elimination, my job was to get her to calm down. I believe in the elimination, she might have gone a quarter and 25 and change off the gate. I might be right, it's a while ago, but I think she did. And I just kind of thought if we could, somehow get her to relax for Dave, then we had a chance. She had the tactical gate speed, which at Woodbine was, immensely important. And she trotted as well as a horse could trot. So barring her doing anything wrong, I knew she had the stamina, I knew she had the desire. Bobby Stewart had told me a couple of things about her, and really it was just a matter of getting her quiet on the night, and we managed to do that. And the race worked out. The seam opened up, and we had Swedish blinds on her, I believe, and he pulled the blinds down, and she trotted up in between them and won the Breeders' Crown at 20-1. Maybe it was fantastic.
Well, on that note, let's have a look back to that race from 2006, again, right here at Woodbine Racetrack. This is Susie's Magic pulling the major upset in that year's Breeders' Crown.
They're often trotting in the first away from down the center, hustles away Susie's Magic. 2 doors down from her trots out Merle's Pearl. In between, fillies there in third, races away Pure Ivory. At the rail fourth is Beeline to protect position, and protect it she will. In fact, she has shut the hole off in Pure Ivory. Conrad has to take back and wrestle that one into fourth. Up on the outside into fifth now, trots up Passionate Glide for Pierce. Backed up to be along in sixth is Quick Credit at the rail. Seventh away as they go into the opening turn is Bye Bye Carey. And then it's the outside three starters. Stars getting away in 8th, 9th, and 10th respectively. They are winning Mystery, followed there by Birmingham and 4 Stars Lindy. In the meantime, a 27-4 opening quarter has been put on the board, and the one that put there is Susie's Magic. It's Susie's Magic and Miller on the point. Up on the outside in second now, Pure Ivory up to challenge and go past for Steve Condren. Pure Ivory finds the front. Back into second now rides Susie's Magic, and there goes Passionate Glide as Pierce gives her cue. She trots up on the outside and takes charge right at the half in 56-4, and on the lead as they trot to the far turn, it is Passionate Glide. Back into second now, it's Pure Ivory. Sitting at the rail from in third is Long Shot Susie's Magic. Then at the rail in fourth is Merle's Pearl, and there goes Beeline to the outside. She was fifth, now fourth, now third, soon to be second as the pace slows around this far turn. Ron Pierce has got the back over, or with the whip over the back of Passionate Glide, and she's going to have to call up more speed. Suddenly on the outside, Beeline has poked her neck in front. Beeline on the outside, Passionate Glide counters at the rail. Three-quarter time is 1:25-4. Passionate Glide on the inside. Second on the outside, trots up Beeline, and here comes Steve Condren on the outside now as he cuts Pure Ivory loose on the far outside, and it's Pure Ivory reaching up on the outside. Passionate Glide beatable tonight. Outside, Pure Ivory's coming on. Pure Ivory, a final surge. Passionate Glide at the rail is unwavering. Passionate Glide, and right there between horses coming on was maybe David Miller to get it all with Susie's Magic. 1:55-4, a hair-raising thriller in the 3-year-old filly trot final. And indeed, it looked like David Miller threw late.
So for you at the time, Tony, you're a young guy just starting out on your own, to be winning in races like the Breeders' Crown. Did it have much impact at that time on your career?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it must have. I mean, I was dealing with, some of the best owners in the sport for a lot of years, before I knew anything about racing in North America. So it was just a privilege to be entrusted with a mare like her, and to train for a guy like Lee DeVissa, who's an absolutely fantastic person. So I'm sure it did, and in some ways it might have been good if it had come a little later. I was pretty young and wasn't really established enough to, for maybe people to think, okay, you win a Breeders' Crown and you get more. Probably if it had have happened 3 or 4 or 5 years later, it may have been better. But again, I mean, I was just lucky. I was the guy on the spot at the right time, and we take some credit for it for sure, because what we did with her, we got her to calm down, and she went on to have a very successful career after. But really, I was just lucky to be dealing with the right people and be given a chance to train a horse of that caliber.
Tony O'Sullivan and Wally Hennessy are special guests tonight, and we'd certainly love to hear from you. If you've got a question for the guys, question or comment, please leave it for us. Right now, we'll take a commercial break. Lots more coming up on this edition of COSA-TV right after the break. And welcome back to tonight's show of COSA-TV. Wally Hennessy, Tony O'Sullivan joining us tonight. Let's go to our second trivia question before we continue our chat with the guys. Going back to 2001, Wally teamed up with a pacer named Scarlet and Gold to capture which race that was quite special to Wally? In 2001, again, Wally and Scarlet and Gold captured a race very special to him. Can you tell us which race that was? If you think you know, leave your answer in our comment section. Well, a horse that gave Wally many special memories, to say the least, is Moneymaker. We couldn't have you on, Wally, without talking about this iconic trotting mare. People would wonder, how does a guy from Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, team up with this mare who was a New York Sire Stakes champion, trained by a native of Sweden? I mean, it's a really wild story when you put it all together. And she was a star of the New York Sire Stakes, and you were Mr. New York Sire Stakes. Was that really how it all began for you with this mare, Wally?
Yes, yeah, exactly, Greg. At the time, Bill Andrews from Vernon Downs, he was the trainer. And Jim Giannuzzi, he was the, I don't know what you call him. He was a special advisor for Carlisle Smith, who had owned a lot of horses in Billy's barn at the time. And anyway, she was by Speedy Crown. She was bred to be a champion, but that doesn't always turn out to be the way it is. But they bought her I think in Kentucky, and anyway, she's quite a story because she just did what she did, and every time she done something, it was like, how did she do that? Her last race of her life. Well, listen, I guess you asked me about. That's what's wrong with me. I can't. I got a bad mind, but I started out because New York Sires, yeah. That's what I was doing at the time. And Moneymaker was a New York Sire. Actually, as a 3-year-old, oh, God, I made a mistake. I was driving a trotter for Brett Pelling, Monet Blue Chip, who was undefeated. I drove her all through her 2-year-old career, undefeated. And she was coming into 3-year-old undefeated. Moneymaker was undefeated. I had a choice to make at Buffalo Raceway. And one of my better choices that I made, I chose Monet Blue Chip over Moneymaker. Monet Blue Chip never get out of the barrier. And Moneymaker, of course, she just did what she always done. She won. So Wally lost Moneymaker for a couple of weeks. And I continued to do the circuit, and the guy that picked up Moneymaker chose over one of Mr. Smith's horses going for 1,800 at Vernon Downs, and he wasn't happy about it. And Jim Giannuzzi got me back on Moneymaker, and I didn't make that mistake again. She was very special. She just did it. Look, guys, if this could tell you anything, and now seriously, if anybody wants to say who was the greatest horse that ever lived, and your thing's going to blow up now, but I can tell you this: the last race of her life. Now, come on. The day they took the harness off her, Montreal, Quebec, the Trot Mondial or whatever Mondial, whatever. She broke the world record by a second and a half. It was in a mile and a quarter, a mile and 3, I don't know, whatever it was. She broke the world record. That was the last day that she ever raced. After all she had accomplished all through her career, and come on. There's nobody could do that. No, and some of the trips I gave her, the Elite Lap, when she won the Elite Lap, if you ever get time to watch them two steers, I'll guarantee you I'd never won 10,000 races driving that way. That was the 2 worst steers I gave in my life. One. She was very.
Yeah, we've had John Campbell on here recently, and he still talks about the Life Sign race and the Little Brown Jug, and he still criticizes his drive and the horse won. So hey, it happens to everybody, and great horses, they find a way, don't they? And it's interesting. I look back at the lines today, Wally. You drove her at 2. I think 3 times. You raced her at Vernon, Saratoga, and Syracuse. I mean, I'm sure you saw glimpses of what she could be. What was your impression back then as a 2-year-old of her?
Okay, like going back to them times, the reason I only drove her that many times was because I was pretty much in demand in the New York circuit then. And like I said, I drove Monet Blue Chip at 2, and she was undefeated. She swept the New York circuit. But there's different legs, and I got to drive Moneymaker, and Moneymaker was always great. But the difference was she was so big, and most of the New York sires are on half-mile tracks. The New York tracks are half-mile. She was too big to handle them at 2. But lo and behold, come Syracuse, the mile track, I got the chance to get on her again, and she came home that day 27 seconds, 26 and 4, 27, when that was unheard of. So did I know she was going to be Moneymaker 5, 6, 7 years later? No, but you could tell that she was coming home 27 seconds, and it felt like I was just jogging. Like I didn't, that's the way she always looked at guys. For you guys watching her, she always looked like she was going in slow motion. And when she was in full gear, she could go buy a hobble pacer. Believe me, she could go buy a hobble pacer. And I must say, Bill Andrews, who trained her at 2 and 3, Jimmy Takter did a tremendous job. I mean, come on, he took her to places that you'd never ever dream of. But Bill Andrews did such a superb job of managing her at 2 and 3. He never threw her to the wolves, and always kept her, in races where she was pretty dominant. So she won 19 of 20 as a 3-year-old and get beat a nose. And that was in the Breeders' Crown, probably her best race of the year. And when he put her away, or when he was done training her after that year, she was like a fresh horse after 20 starts. I mean, she was the matron. It was just like going a training trip. So that really means something. And I know a lot of trainers, and Tony, you'll agree with this. Like what happens now is like we overdrive them so much at 2 and 3 that we don't have a horse later in life. And that's why I want to give Bill Andrews a lot of credit.
All right, well, let's fast forward, Wally, to I guess the big one, the Elite Lop, and
Oh boy.
maybe just describe maybe the atmosphere. What did folks over there think of Moneymaker? Did she have that star appeal, that star status?
Well, I'll tell you how much status Moneymaker had. The Elite Lop, of course, she won that. She won a lot of races over there, but racing over in Europe, it's a big sport over there, and there's a lot of people attend the races. And in the paddock areas, when the big races are there, the paddock areas are completely full. You can't even move in the paddock areas. And Moneymaker, when she would go out to warm up, when Moneymaker showed up, everybody showed up. And when she would go out to warm up, the people in the paddock area, it was like Moses in the Red Sea, like they'd open it up. And as she was walking through, and she would walk, she couldn't get her keyed up. As she was walking through, now you got to understand, these are all horsemen. They're owners, trainers, drivers, grooms. They're giving her standing ovations. They're clapping as she's going to the track. This is for warm up. And she listen, they called her Sophia Loren over there. Come on. She was amazing. I don't know, the Elite. I wish she had picked a different race than the Elite Lop. This was one of my better drives.
Well, let's have a look at it. We'll critique the drive after. How does that sound? Here it is. Curtis is going to roll the tape from just one of her many great victories, the Elite Lop.
Ökar takten, 100 meter kvar till start av 1998 års rit. Alldeles strax är vi igång. Där släpper startbilen iväg fältet. Ett Huxtable honan invändigt utmanas av 2 Moneymaker. Från kommer också 5 Giant Touchdown. Jag tycker att det är COSA-TV som har avgjort spetsstriden med innerspåret sett. Huxtable Hona med 2 Moneymaker var väldigt, väldigt bra med i början.
Väldigt, väldigt bra var hon med och förvånansvärt bra. Och nu får vi den här duellen dem emellan. Och så ska vi se vem som kan galoppera Defida Nu.
Galopp för nummer 4, Defida Nu. 1 Huxtable Hona i ledningen med 2 Moneymaker utvändigt. Som tredje häst, där följer 5 Giant Touchdown. Som fjärde nummer 3 Frisky Fraser. Så är positionerna när 1 Huxtable Hona, COSA-TV börjar 500 meter på 1.09,0. Kommentar.
Ja, fortfarande stenhårt tempo. Förvånansvärt nog så väljer Atle Hamre ryggen på Moneymaker med Giant Touchdown. Han kunde ha gått i ryggen och fått en smyglöpning i rygg på Huxtable Hornline. Det tyder på att Atle Hamre är ute för att ställa till med en riktig sensation här.
Tredje spinner, spår 7, Georgia Limited. Tredje utvändigt, Jim Frick bakom nummer 6, Running Sea. Så en liten lucka till nummer 8, Rival Damkar. Nu har de bara 700 meter kvar till mål. Ett Huxtable Hona, 2 Moneymaker. Sida vid sidan är 2 Moneymaker. Då stenhårt attackerar nummer 1 Huxtable Hona. Är på väg att koppla greppet. De passerar 1000 meter där. Klockan visar 1.10,5. Då tar 2 Moneymaker över.
Oj. Jag har aldrig sett något liknande. Jag vill påstå att här är bland det värsta jag har sett. Hon fullständigt på ett par meter krossade de övriga. Bara klev över Huxtable Hornline.
Har han kört för tidigt, den gode Wally Hennessy? Frågan är det när det är 300 meter kvar till mål. 2 Moneymaker leder. Det är 5 Giant Touchdown som är på väg att ta upp jakten. Längre ut kommer också nummer 7 Georgia Limited. Galopperar ett Huxtable Hona som slagen. 2 Moneymaker. Wally Hennessy leder. 5 Giant Touchdown försöker. Långt ut kommer 7 Georgia Limited. Mycket snabbt. Fortfarande 2 Moneymaker. För 7 Georgia Limited som närmar sig hela vägen in mot mål. Men nummer 2 Moneymaker kommer att räddas av mållinjen och segern är Moneymakers. Nummer 2 Wally Hennessy vinner. Jimmy Takter. Vi lyfter för kepsen för Jimmy Takter, tränare. Detta, Thomas Nilsson, var en fantastisk prestation.
Look at that crowd, incredible, Wally, and I'm sure you've watched this many times in your life and replayed the race. You talked about the strategy, though, and I mean, you obviously raced her that way by design. What led to driving her that way, and probably different than you would drive her if you were racing her in North America?
Absolutely. Listen, what happens there, as everybody just watched that, I had the best horse. So Josh Verbeck, who had the rail, he's one of the leading drivers all across Europe. And he had a whole lot more respect for her after the elimination and that final than he did before we went into it. I can tell you that. But racing is racing, and he had the rail and I had the 2-hole. But if I go in the 2-hole, as you've seen, the other fellow was out, I would have been in the 2, would have been behind him. And the way they race over there, I probably never would have got racing room. And if I did get racing room, it probably would have been too late. So I knew what I was sitting on. And I don't know what oh yo yo means, but when he was saying oh yo yo, I was going, let's go, girl. And like Josh was driving his horse, going to the half, keeping me out, and I was just kind of sitting on a freak. So I said, as soon as we straighten up the backstretch, I said, I better let the big girl go here. And Jimmy did a tremendous job. Come on, he did a tremendous job with this mare. And all I was thinking, like when she cleared up over there, I said, don't go inside the pylons and don't fall out, because she was, what you've seen there is what she done all the time. And funny about that, one other thing about Julie Crone, the day that she did the under saddle with her, I spent the day with Julie Crone because Julie had never done that before. And she said, Wally, she was very nervous. She was very nervous. And I was a little keyed up because I never rode a prompter before. And finally, she was so keyed up. I said, listen, Julie, please. I said, don't worry about it. I said, she'll make up for your mistakes. She's did it for me for 6 years.
And she went out that day and set a world record under saddle by like 4 seconds. Just incredible. Yeah. And looking at the pictures there, the crowd, the atmosphere is incredible. Tony, going back to your days in New Zealand, what about the big races over there? New Zealand, I'm not sure if you would have gotten to the big races in Australia. What's the atmosphere like on those days compared to some of our big events here?
Well, you know, back in the late 80s, mid 90s, I mean, the atmosphere was like everywhere. It was, you know, big race days they were a big deal. The New Zealand Cup, I've actually never been to a New Zealand Cup, but you know, the atmosphere is still the same. The Australian thoroughbred atmosphere is second to none, even now. So, you know, I think it's pretty relative to the times, and yeah, back when racing was very popular and maybe the only game in town, the crowds were big and the atmosphere was great.
And we'll get your thoughts. We're talking Moneymaker, obviously, as a trainer that's been around a long time, have had many great horses yourself. Where do you rate Moneymaker? Maybe just in general, let's not talk trotters and pacers, just of all-time great horses. Where do you rank her?
Well, like Wally said, I mean, she's got to be in the top couple of all. You don't do what she did for such a long period of time unless you're exceptional. And there's obviously been some others that have done very, very well, but what she did, and probably more, maybe I'm wrong on this, but probably more in the time that she did it, when what she did, trotting quarters in 26 and 27, was probably unheard of. Now it's a little more common. So she was clearly ahead of her time, and just watching that, I mean, I had nothing to do with her, but that gives you goosebumps watching that elite lot.
And the fact that she took on the male counterparts most predominantly as an older trotter, and the fact that she did so much globe trotting. I mean, she was back and forth North America and Europe, you know, 2 or 3 different stints over her career. So I think when you factor the overall body of work, yeah, she has got to be right up there in the conversation with the all-time greats. Before we leave her, though, we want to have a look at one more of her finest performances. One of her final career starts. Wally, you talked about how strong she ended her career. This was her world record at the time in the Nat Ray. Can you set up that race for us?
Well, the mile track was definitely, you know, her finest moments because, like I said before, she was big mare. She got around. She won on the half. She won every way, on the half, on the 5/8, on the mile, different distances, standing starts, turnaround starts. I don't care. It didn't matter what it was. She won races. But the mile track, and she loved the Meadowlands. She absolutely loved the Meadowlands. If you watch this race, she was about the only horse I probably ever drove in my life that gave me so much confidence going in. I felt like I could win. And even now, like, I could be driving a horse that's an absolute layover at 1-9. I don't go in with the confidence that I had any time I ever drove her. But if you ever were able to watch any of her races, she never was extended. Never. I mean, this race here, the Nat Ray, you watch it, she set a world record that day, and I think it was her last start at the Meadowlands. Maybe that was her last year racing as well. But you can imagine how fast I could have went if I wanted to. I don't know whether she would have done better after it or whatever, but it wasn't me. I don't mean me. But I never ever extended her, and I never had to.
Well, let's take a look back at this from 2000, the $500,000 Nat Ray, then world record performance from Moneymaker.
On the outside, they're at the post for the Nat Ray final, and here they come. And they're off, and it's J.W. Dutch Treat from the outside, and C.R. Commando is striding out for Rod Allen from between horses. Fern showing some speed, and Moneymaker floats out of there. She's racing in third. J.W. Dutch Treat has gone off stride, and Magician had to check up briefly to get around him. He's caught wide there entering the turn. Toward the inside fourth, Rafael Ambrosio. Magician moving up on the outside fifth. Ringside Rocket has settled nicely sixth. Nikki Kolkol from off the pace in seventh as they hit the first quarter in 27 seconds flat. set, and JW Dutch Street is on a wild break and trails the field, and it's CR Commando who's marching along on the point. He's 2.5 lengths in front of Moneymaker. Fern is another 2 lengths back in third, and Magician has a tough trip. He's parked on the outside first over, trying to slide up a closer fourth. Raffaello Ambrosio locked in on the inside. Ringside Rocket picks up cover second over. Seventh is Nicky Colcol. JW Dutch Street far behind at the half and 55-1, and CR Commando and Rod Allen well clear, 2.5 lengths in front. Moneymaker starts to pick it up now from second, and Wally Hennessy begins to edge closer with Moneymaker. Magician has been parked from the start, and Moneymaker will take her shot now with 3/8 to go, ranging up alongside CR Commando. Magician is 2 lengths behind the champion mare on the outside third. Fern shuffled back fourth. Ringside Rocket setting up his late kick third over, and Moneymaker is on the lead at the top of the stretch. 3/4 in 1:24 flat, and Moneymaker and Wally Hennessy are pouring it on now. They're 5 lengths in front with 1/8 of a mile to come. Magician is all out second. Ringside Rocket and Nicky Colcol trying to close in, but they're all chasing the Queen of Trotting. Moneymaker in her final Meadowlands appearance is striding home, and Moneymaker will do it. It's Moneymaker in the Nat Ray. Nicky Colcol second, Raffaello Ambrosio photos with Fern for third in 1:52-1, and that is a world record for Moneymaker.
And you said it, Wally. She makes it look effortless. She's so big and powerful. And what a way to cap off her Meadowlands career on that particular day. What a career it was for her. But not always, I mean, not everything came up roses for her, though. You know, as a youngster, she made breaks at times. And then she had a health scare. You know, I almost forgot about this. Were you driving her the time? I think she had the irregular heartbeat and had to pull up out of the race. And that was a big scare for race fans when that happened.
Yes. Yeah, I was that night. You know, that was like part of that's why Jimmy Takter has done such a tremendous job with Moneymaker. What happened there? She I don't know, like going into the race, I guess she felt all right and everything. She felt good to me scoring down as well. And behind the gate, I just kind of thought maybe she was a little dull, but she had been dull before and still won. And but anyway, I always did that like floating out with her because I never really had to really be aggressive out of the gate with her, kind of. She could get there whenever I wanted to. But that night, like between the quarter and the half, I was going to make a move with her and there was no response. So by the time I got to the half, I said, you know, there's something wrong here. So I just kind of took her out of the race then. And lo and behold, yeah, she AFibbed, and there was even maybe chatter at the time, maybe that was the end of her career. And if it was the end of her career, it was still a tremendous career she had at that time because she had been going back and forth from Europe. But anyway, bring Jimmy Takter in one more time, and that's the job he did, got her back, and she made another $2.5 million after. They gave her, I guess, you know, electrolyte imbalance or whatever that causes. Sometimes that's what causes AFibs, and I'm not sure. You'd have to ask Jimmy what he did or what happened, but whatever he done right. And one thing I will say, the people that own this mare, the Moneymaker stable, well, beforehand, it was Carlisle Smith. And then they bought into her, the Moneymaker stable bought into her midway in her 3-year-old career, owning the complete control of her after her last race as a 3-year-old. They were the greatest people. Like, listen, it's no picnic, guys. When you're in the Grand Circuit and you have a horse like that, the pressure on people is tremendous. They never put 1 ounce of pressure on myself or Jimmy. The Moneymaker, that was the Antonaccis and David Reed, Jeff Stein, Harvey Gold, the Nikitas. That it was an amazing group. I guess it was pretty easy to be amazing, I guess, when you never lose, but they never put 1 ounce of pressure on me, never, ever. Like, what do you do? What do you don't do? Is she get beat? You know, that's okay. You know, let's next week. You know, is she okay? Yeah, she's okay. That's it. You know, and they were, and believe me, that helps a lot. Tony can tell you this, that when you have a good horse, like, people expect things out of them, and when it doesn't happen, there's usually a move involved, whether it's the driver or the trainer or whatever. That's what happens. And I don't know whether I was going to be replaced. I should have been replaced, but I wasn't.
And well, the competitive nature is what drives you. And Tony, that's a good point. Talk about maybe Tony O'Sullivan now, from the Tony O'Sullivan who was just starting out in training. Do you mellow out a little bit over age, or are you still as competitive as ever? And you know, how much pressure do you put on yourself and maybe guys that are driving for you in big races?
I think you naturally mellow out. In terms of, you probably, you know, water off a duck's back, so to speak, is a lot easier as you get older. You've seen it before. You've seen other people go through it, and you know how to handle it. For me, probably having my family makes it a lot easier. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I love what I do and whatever, but my wife and kids are the most important thing. And if they're healthy and doing okay, food on the table, then you know, it's a lot easier to take the big losses. I mean, in terms of myself, I'm extremely competitive, and I'm my own worst critic. I certainly don't need anybody to tell me when I've done something wrong, because I already know that I've done something wrong. And you know, as Wally can say to ask his wife, you can ask mine. I mean, I'm not a very nice person to live with when things aren't going well, and the last couple of years things haven't gone very well. So you know, I don't think you lose the competitive drive. I think once you're a competitive person and you've been successful and you've been at the you know, the higher end or the top echelon of your chosen career, you don't lose that. And I think that there's a reason people get to a certain point, and it's because they have that competitiveness and they have that drive. And I believe that most very successful people in any business are probably harder on themselves than the average person, and that's just the way, you know, that's just the way we're wired. Nothing you can do about it. So I've mellowed. I've like everybody in this business, I've had the ups, I've had the downs, I've been praised, I've been kicked, I've been, you know, told I don't know what I'm doing and whatever, and that's fine. But I think as you get older, you learn to handle it better. And definitely for me, my grounding is my wife and daughters.
And you said, and I think I even read an article on you recently where you said you haven't been satisfied with your numbers the last year or two. So having said that, coming into this year, what are your expectations? And do you feel you're poised to see those numbers go back up a little bit this year?
Well, I mean, you know, for numbers to go up, you need numbers to start with. As anybody in this business knows, whether you're a trainer, driver, owner, TV presenter, unfortunately, the nature of the beast is horses fall by the wayside, and they're certainly bred to go fast, but they're probably not bred, you know, for the most part, to be tough. They've all got, every stallion line seems to have a problem, and you know, you've got to deal with them. So you know, I would like to think the horses we have, we have a decent group of, you know, an evenly based caliber of horse. You look to the 2 and 3 year olds to really make the big money, and unfortunately for us, we only have a few of those, so it's going to be difficult. But again, you know what, we've been in the position before. We know how to get it done, and I'm sure if we have the right horse in our barn, the results will come back, and you know, we'll get the best out of whatever we've got in our barn and deal with what we've got.
And in this business, you never know when that next horse is going to come into your barn, right? And it can come in a variety of ways. We're going to take a look back to one that you had in 2011, Tony, that certainly posted some major victories for you at the time. His name was Alsace Hanover, a son of the Ponderosa. talk about him at that point in time. Here he is in the Adios. Maybe we'll look at this first of all, Tony, his Adios victory, and then we'll talk more about Alsace Hanover afterwards.
Often pacing, that's Powerful Miss going for the lead on the outside. In between horses, Real Spatial down along the inside. Custard the Dragon as they race around the turn, and we got an early battle on the outside. Powerful Miss, Montrell Tig lets him go with Custard the Dragon around the turn. Racing third is Real Spatial. Alsace Hanover gets away fourth. Opening quarter 26-1. Into the lane first time. Passing the casino stands, racing fifth, that's Roll With It Harry, pacing sixth, Wind Me Up and moving on the outside, Hug the Dragon, 18 in the Odysseus Blue Chip, trail the field, here comes Ron Pearson, Alsace Hanover on the move after the leader, Powerful Miss. Has the lead by a length and a half. Custard the Dragon second. Alsace Hanover on the outside third. Halfway home in 53-3, 27-2. Second quarter. Down the backside they go. It's Powerful Miss, the leader. Alsace Hanover on the outside second. Custard the Dragon third. Wind Me Up. Racing fourth. Racing fifth. Real Spatial. Sixth on the outside. Hug a Dragon. We got a new leader. It's Alsace Hanover and Ron Pierce. 3 quarters. 20-3. Backside in 27. Powerful Miss racing second. Custard the Dragon third. On the outside, Wind Me Up fourth. Down the stretch they come. Alsace Hanover with the lead and opens up. Powerful Miss. Custard the Dragon in the lightning lane. Hug a Dragon on the outside with Wind Me Up. But they won't catch Ron Pierce and Alsace Hanover, the winner in 1:48.3/5, a world's record. 3-year-old pacing geldings.
Big mile from almost 10 years ago, Tony. Tell us about this horse. I mean, he's not one that you think back of as a household name, but he kind of quietly made, I think, $1 million plus. And as we saw there, he was as talented as there was in that year's crop.
Yeah, he was. I mean, there's a horse that, that really helped us propel to the next level. I mean, he was the first really top horse that we had. We'd had some nice ones, and obviously Susie's Magic. But that's why I said before, if she had come along a little later in my career, maybe I would have been better off. But Alsace, or as his nickname is now, it's Champ. He was a dream. To be honest, he hit his knee that badly that he usually would lose a length or two coming off any turn. And I could give you certainly 2 races that he would have won for sure if he had got around the last turn. And probably, he might have been up for Horse of the Year type thing, because he was I think he only was ever beat maybe a half a length if he didn't win in all of his starts as a 3-year-old. And that Adios was, that was exceptional, and that was the second time Pierce had driven him. The first time he won the elimination in 48-4, and he wasn't a tough horse to drive, but he wasn't an easy horse to drive because he did hit his knee, and you had to get him through the turns, and somehow, we had him right, we had him out running, we had him running out just enough, and Ronnie did the rest, and because he was so good at what he did, he figured out a way to get that horse running out going into the turn, and he could keep him accelerating. So just a joy to train. He was a lot of work, a lot of learning on him, shoeing changes, etc., and getting him rigged up in such a way that he could get through the turns, but then not run out too badly in the straights. And there's a horse that you take a lot of pride in training, and a real privilege to train him, and that was a very, very fun year for sure.
Yep. And you had Ronnie Pierce driving at the time, and Ronnie's been retired now for a couple of years, and hard to believe, when you look back, you sort of forget that, he not that long ago was certainly a prime player on the Grand Circuit throughout North America. And speaking of top drivers, Wally, when you think back in your career, who are some of the the tough guys you drove against. Let's not even talk Grand Circuit. Maybe the day in day out guys. For example, at Pompano, I mean, you had Kevin Wallace, Bruce Ranger, Joe Pavia. Those guys come to mind. Who was maybe one guy that was just really competitive and tough to drive against over the years?
Well, you know, like you're right, Pompano would be where I would have the best answer for that. But I first want to say that by far, the greatest driver and the guy that's got the whole package, John Campbell, never will be another. I never drove much. I drove against John on occasions, you know, when I was in the big races and stuff like that, but not on a nightly basis like I do in Florida or New York. But John Campbell is just head and shoulders above everybody. And you know what? Look at. Let me give an example. This spring, just before we got this pandemic, they put on a promotion down in Pompano. People 10,000 wins and over. Just a little promotional thing. Nothing. No money. Nothing. Just promotional thing. Well, people came in for it, like Dave Pallone, Tony Morgan. Who all was there? My brain ain't worth a quarter. But anyway, I'll tell you what they didn't have to do. There was 4 or 5 already there. Myself, Peter Wren, Kevin Wallace, Bruce Ranger came down. On a nightly basis at Pompano. We may not go for the big money, but come on down. These boys know how to win. Like them, there's Peter's got over 10,000, Kevin's got over 10,000, myself, Bruce, Rick Plano's got 7,000, David Ingraham's got 6,000. These guys know how to get to the winner's circle. So, look, I consider all the guys I compete against that do it for a living threats. You give them the right horse, they can get the job done. I don't. Personally, I was never intimidated by anybody. I might have been a little geared up, you know, going into a bigger race than normal, but they all can get the job done now. I mean, these horses so simple today that you put somebody on that has never won a pari-mutuel race. How's he beating 4 guys that's won 10,000 races because he had a better horse? Yeah. Right. Basically. Greg, that was a good question. I'm not a guy that can give a good answer to that question. I can tell you who's the best. You know.
John Campbell? Is that who you said?
Oh, by far.
Okay. Well, Tony, I'll put this to you in terms of training and driving, right? There's always that question, you know, what's more important? Is it the trainer having the horse ready or the driver that can get him across? And then others say that, you know, a great horse, there's a group of top drivers that could all win with that said horse. Do you believe in that, or do you think there are certain guys that can just get a little bit more, or just have a certain touch with a certain kind of horse?
Yeah, I agree with Wally in some aspects that hey, for all of us, given the right horse, a lot of guys with a little bit of talent and a little bit of smarts can get the job done. I believe there's certain drivers that make horses maybe not go faster is not the right word, but definitely get a lot more out of them. And I think on the training side, I think I mean, at the end of the day, a good horse is a good horse. A great horse is a great horse. And it's probably a lot easier or not as difficult to make a mistake, whether you're a driver or a trainer, with a good horse or a great horse. But I do believe that there are certain people that can get the best out of any horse. I guess is probably the easier way to put it. Whatever caliber of animal they're dealing with, there's you learn through experience and just thinking outside the box sometimes. And I would say the same goes for driving. I mean, if you put 10 guys with equal amount of talent in terms of who can get a horse to go fast, the guy that thinks better is going to probably outdrive them 9 times out of 10. And I think it can be the same can be kind of said for training. I mean, there's a reason that the top guys over the years have stayed at the top, and there's a reason why there's other people that unfortunately, they battle along, and that's not to be rude and not to take away from anybody or give props to anybody else, but there has to be a human aspect in training and racing, and my belief is that there are some people that just figure out a way to help the horse a little more.
That's a good point. I mean, Wally, why is it one guy can drive a horse a certain way and finish 6th? Another guy the next week can jump up, give the horse an identical trip, and the horse wins by 2 lengths. Is it in the hands, or is it the way you communicate with the horse? What do you think it is?
Well, just before I answer that question, Greg, I think this will answer the other question on the training and driving side. If you want to go to the top shelf, like, if I was a trainer, there are certain drivers. There's a lot of drivers that are equal, but there are certain drivers that can start the year out with your horse in March, April, or May, get the job done for you all year, and still you still have the horse in October, November. That's the guy that I'd be looking for. We all can make them go fast, because if you ask them to go fast now, they'll go fast. Now you're going to have to ask me that other question again, because I forgot what it was.
Just again, how 2 guys can drive a horse the identical way, the identical trip, but one guy, the horse doesn't perform, and the other guy, the horse jumps up and wins impressively. What makes that difference?
In my mind, yeah. I think it is the right answer. It's momentum. Some people know how fast, like, you can take a teletimer away, and the greats, the ones that can do exactly what you just asked me, will know how fast they're going. A lot of fellas, win a lot of races. They're not quite sure, they're not sure quite how fast they really are going. I think the guys that can do what you just asked that question is that when somebody's going slow, you're going fast. When they're going fast, you're going slow. And what happens is, all we see in races is the quarters, the halves, the 3/4. It's just every quarter mile you get a time reading, but a lot happens in a quarter. So
it's just a subtle. It seems like a subtle thing, maybe just in the hands. Yeah.
And you're not using the horse, even though you're making the move. You're making the move not into speed. You're making the move when they're going slow. And if you make a move into speed, you may get there, but you took so much out of your horse that you're not going to maybe get the job done. Where the other guy, that the question you asked, like, how can he do it? He's moving into speed that isn't there. Right. I think that's a good answer to that question. I know over my years that I know how fast I'm going most times. I think, but
probably have a good feel for it.
Yeah, well, I did it enough, but I believe that's the thing. Like, like the horses, like if you might use them a couple of times, but if you use them full throttle against full throttle, it ain't going to work.
No. Well, let's go to our next trivia question here, guys. And speaking of driving stats, we want to know where Wally's 10,491 career driving wins places him on the all-time list. Wally closing in on 10,500 wins, 10,491 to be exact in his career. Where does that place him on the all-time list of drivers? And again, if you think you know the answer, drop us a comment. And we're going to recap all of the trivia questions and our poll question as well. Maybe Curtis can bring up our poll question again, give you another look at that quickly. We had a look at Wally winning the Elite Lop earlier. And our poll question tonight, we wanted to know which of these races would be at the top of your bucket list if you haven't already seen it. The Elite Lop, the Hamiltonian, the Prix d'Amérique, or something other than those three. And we'll recap those results at the end of the show as well. Tony, we want to switch back to a good trotting filly that you had from back in 2015. Her name was Muscle Baby Doll. Biggest win came in the Duenna at the Meadowlands. So at the time, I think a 52 victory on that night. And the Duenna, I believe at the time, would that be a prep going toward the Hamiltonian Oaks?
Yeah, it was the prep before the Oaks, yeah.
Okay. So what was the master plan at that point with the filly? Were you eyeing up the Oaks? Was she eligible to that?
No, she wasn't. She wasn't eligible to the Oaks. We kept her eligible to the Duenna. I believe an Oaks payment would have had to have been made maybe when she was a baby or a 2-year-old, and it wasn't made. So there was a gap in the schedule for her Sire Stakes and the Grand Circuit stuff up here. So we took a shot and took her to the Duenna, and she raced against a few of the fillies that were in the Oaks, and we got lucky enough to beat them. It was a pretty big thrill.
And is it kind of bittersweet in a way where you win, you're very happy with that, you beat fillies that you said were going to be racing in the Oaks, but then knowing you're not eligible to that big event?
Yeah, of course it is, right? I mean, you go and you hope that you can do well against them, and then when things work out and you beat the best, at least some of the best. I think it was divisions, so I don't remember exactly who we were in against, but for sure we're in with some of the Oaks fillies. So then, there's the unknown. Well, what if we had have been in? One of those things, never ever going to find out, but it was a great thrill to take an Ontario-bred filly that, kind of quite often the Ontario-breds don't get the accolades on the Grand Circuit that maybe they should, and to go down and give them a good run it was great.
She was an extremely talented filly, a daughter of Muscle Mass, and here is that 2015 victory in the Duenna, a division of the Duenna at the Big M.
Lined up in behind the gate and heading for the start. And they're off. First away is Marion Millionaire for the lead. Scented Roses kicks out well, and Model Behaviors right there from the inside. These three are the strongest leavers. Muscle Baby Doll is moving up in fourth. Magic Marker trots away in fifth, just in front of Lulu Hanover. Sky Hanover is seventh in the early stages. Onda de Mer is racing in eighth, and backing off last is Senable, who is the early trailer, as they trot toward the quarter. And the leader is Marion Millionaire, who's already starting to slow the pace a length in front. So on the move is Model Behaviors, coming quickly on the outside. Scented Roses jammed in along the inside, 28 seconds for the quarter. Model Behavior to the lead, and Muscle Baby Doll revs up on the outside for Dave Miller. She's under Whip Tamp Urging, now up into second and rushing up to challenge for and take command. Further back is Magic Marker, who's traveling along fifth, about 7 lengths from the lead. Sixth and behind her is Lulu Hanover, and Sky Hanover can't keep up right now. She's under Whip Tamp Urging, gapping away in seventh. 2 lengths behind her is Onda de Mer, and at the back is Senable, who is the trailer. 55-2, 27-2 in the second quarter, and they move on to the turn, and Muscle Baby Doll leads at a length. Right there on the inside is Model Behavior in second. Marion Millionaire bump drafting her helmet third with 3/8 to go. Scented Roses fourth. Magic Marker is racing in fifth. Scented Roses to the outside. Magic Marker grabs that cover. Marion Millionaire thought about squeezing out there, but sits in on the inside, and Lulu Hanover is trotting in sixth as they come to the 3/4 mark, and it's Muscle Baby Doll who's there in 124 flat. They come to the top of the stretch. Muscle Baby Doll edging away to a 2.5 length lead. Up on the outside is Scented Roses moving into second. Model Behavior racing in third. Marion Millionaire shakes free, trying to gain on the outside, but Muscle Baby Doll is kicking away from the field, and Muscle Baby Doll is wrapped up. Marion Millionaire trying to get past Scented Roses for second. A hat trick for Dave Miller. Muscle Baby Doll the easiest kind of winner. Then Marion Millionaire, Scented Roses, and Lilu Hanover in 1:52.
Just cruising that night in the 1:52. What did the filly ultimately go on to do the rest of the way that year, Tony?
She won. She won nearly every gold, and then she won I believe she won the division of, or the elimination for the Elegant Image, and then she got pretty fired up in the final. Actually, flipped her pallet, and you know, obviously she didn't finish up well. She went to Indiana and won the last two late stake races out there, and then she finished, I believe, third in the American National to actually our other trotter, Your Majestic. She won it that year. And then we brought her back as a 4-year-old, and she had a few soundness issues, and Joe and Frank Bellino decided to sell her as a broodmare. So, you know, her career was cut short, but she was a super talented filly, and it was a real shame to not see her race at 4 and 5 years old. I think she would have done a really good job as an age mare.
Yeah, you forget when until you watch replays like that. She made that look absolutely effortless. There was a lot left in the tank on that night, and then you start to think back how dominant she was in the OSS that year. One of the great Ontario-bred fillies in recent years. We talked about driving and what we think makes a top driver. Before that, let's focus more on training. Tony, in your mind, in 2020. It's a different time we're in. What are the ingredients in your mind that make a top trainer? What do the top trainers have that they share in common?
It's tough. I mean, the business has changed. To me, there seems to be it's a little more diverse between the overnight trainers and the stakes trainers. And in some ways, I think they're two different animals, two different avenues of training. I mean, racing racehorses week in, week out, there's an art to keeping them, racing 40 times a year, 35 times a year. If you've got a top end free for all and they stay in the free for all, that's great. But to play the condition game with horses and to go up and down the condition ladder, there's certainly an art to it. I think the training methods have probably changed. I can't speak for how other people train. I have a good idea of how some of my peers and friends train. But speaking for myself, I mean, when we had a lot of conditioned horses, they were trained differently than the ones that we had to peak for a stake race. So I think they're different. I think probably what separates is just attention to detail, knowing your animal, knowing where they fit, for conditioned horses, and learning or knowing when when they're in the right spot to win. Again, I mean, as Wally's alluded to with driving and the way racing is, the racing's changed. I mean, there's certain guys that want their horses up on the front or closed to it every single week, and it doesn't matter what class they're in, and it doesn't matter what what animal they've got. In terms of stake training in young horses, I think that's completely different. I think there's a lot of trainers that are very, very good with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, whereas some of the trainers that maybe train the conditioned horses probably wouldn't fare as well, just because it's not what they do. So for me, probably the biggest thing is attention to detail and listening to every horse tell you what they need, and not being a one-stop shop, not being a factory, and tailoring your training methods to each individual horse as much as you can.
And Wally, you're a little bit different than a lot of catch drivers. You've always stayed somewhat hands-on, helping to operate a small stable. And in fact, I think you do it yourself now, right? But you and brother Dan, for several years, had a stable together at Pompano. Dan is back in his native PEI now, and want to wish him all the best. And just talk about that, though, Wally. Being so hands-on with the horses over all those years. Do you think that helped you on the driving side?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't think it made me a better driver, but working with the horses every day, it keeps you sharp. You're not going in half dead when you're like. I think the hardest thing to do. I've done it many times in my life. Going to a certain racetrack when I was doing what's this Gold Cup? Well, I walked into a racetrack only having one drive. That's tough. You're going in for a big race, and but if you work with the horses all day and you're ready. You're I guess it would be like an athlete, warming up in the morning, or going to practice in the morning, and getting ready for the nighttime game. It helped me immensely. It really did. And going back on the training side, like Tony's right on the button there, but everything that he said. My little thing that Dan and I did, like Dan and I did okay, because we never really trained a lot of great horses, but we had some. I think if you keep a horse happy, it doesn't matter how you train him. To keep the horse happy, if you think that it's by leaving them in the stall every other day, or if it's to train them every day, or if a horse is happy, I think a happy camper will give you the best they got. And listen, some guys can show up and just race. I couldn't do that. I can tell you, I wouldn't be on with you tonight talking about that I'm still driving. I do my own now. I have 4 or 5. I do them myself. Nobody's with me. I do it all.
Probably good for your frame of mind as well, right? And especially now with the last couple of months, it's given you something to do in the mornings. Get out and do that. I think you're an avid golfer as well. Is that right?
I know one thing. If I didn't have this the last 8 or 10 weeks, I'd have had to go to a doctor and get the best prescription anxiety pill you'd need, knowing the man. But believe me, the horses are. They've kept me like. Listen, I grew up with horses, so I love doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm still doing it. I love doing it. I'm not going to stop doing it until I have to. But everybody's different. I respect the horse. When I drive them, when I train them, when I groom them, I'm not happy unless things are done the way that I think that they should be done correctly. So, and I feel that way driving, and nobody's going to tell me I gave a bad drive. I know when I give a bad drive. You can't drive correctly all the time, and sometimes you're put in a position where you have to drive that way. But I can tell you this: you can't change it when it's done. Once it's over, it's over. So I mean,
just turn the page.
You either got to be able to be a person that can get over it and move on, or I believe if you dwell on things that don't work, it affects you on things that should work.
Well, we saw the smile on your face a moment ago when we started to roll the Gold Cup and Saucer clip. I know this this will bring a smile to your face watching this. And Wally, for a long time, with your busy schedule at Pompano in the winter time, and then the New York Sire Stakes primarily in the summer, you never got a chance really to get back home to Charlottetown for Old Home Week and compete in the Gold Cup and Saucer. And you grew up, as every Islander, watching that race and dreaming of one day winning it. So to go back there and be able to do it, we're getting a look here at Driven to Win, the year he went down for Scott Bell. who took the horse at the time for trainer Joe Holloway, and you picked up the drive. What were the circumstances behind landing that drive that year in the Gold Cup and Saucer?
Yeah, well, that's easy to answer because Scotty Bell, he grew up in Charlottetown, you know, and he hung around my father's stable, and his grandfather, Eric Eichmore's side, as you know, you knew the name, not many people would, but him and my father competed against one another. And when Scotty came down to the States, I believe I was the one that got him hooked up with Joe Holloway to train. And Scotty always wanted to, you know, he's always at Joe to get a horse to come home for the Gold Cup and Saucer. And the Gwartzes owned Driven to Win, and they gave him permission to take him home. And Scotty automatically, I was his driver of choice, if that be right, you know. And at the time, I was able to make arrangements to get there, and I'm glad he asked me. And the one thing I'll tell you about that night, the Gwartzes, who owned Driven to Win, that same night, they had a horse in the Yonkers Trot Saturday night. They chose Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island over the Yonkers Trot. And if you ask them today, they said they made the right choice. Now, they won the Yonkers Trot that night. They weren't there in attendance. They were at Charlottetown. Anybody that has ever had the privilege to be there that night, or even for the week, I'll say, or any time as far as that goes, but especially to be there on Gold Cup and Saucer night, Greg, you know, you grew up with it. If harness racing is in your blood and you love harness racing, that's where you want to be. Them races you put up earlier, Elite Lop, I was there. Hamiltonian, I was there. Prix de Marique, I was there. But give me the Gold Cup and Saucer. I'll tell you that. The guys there, Lee Drake and now Adam Walsh, Peter McPhee, Jerry McCabe, all them boys, the show they put on, and Ken Oakes, everybody, the show that they put on and during that week. And then with the finalization. And what about the call in all of Canada? Who is it? My man Vance Cameron.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Boom, just like that. So it's I think it should be on everybody's bucket list. And believe me, I told you where the races I've seen and I've been a part of, and I'm telling you that the Gold Cup and Saucer is a must for anybody that John Campbell went. I was at John to go. He went and asked him about it. He was so, I don't think he was surprised, but it was a show.
Yeah, one of only a few really in the sport that can rival something like the Little Brown Jug in Delaware, Ohio, or the Elite Lop atmosphere, as you mentioned. So let's go back to 2005. This was Wally teaming up with fellow Islander Scott Bell and a pacer named Driven to Win. They had post one on that night, and there was no beating the pacer here. Vance Cameron with the race call.
They're lining up. Driven to Win. Sparkler. Rich Camelot. Magical Gigi. Sandals Dexter. Our First Falcon. Harmony P. Back from the past on the grandstand side. It's showtime at Charlottetown. And they're off in the Cup and Saucer. Sandals Dexter leaving out. Magical Gigi with him. Driven to Win with rail control. Stacking them up 3 wide into the turn. Sparkler towards the rail. Rich Camelot getting away 5th. Our First Falcon towards the rail 6th. Then in 7th, Harmony P. Back from the past, trailing the field. That is Driven to Win. In line to Wally Hennessy. They're on the choo-choo here. Going by the quarter pole. Pacing second towards the rail. Magical GG opening quarters up 27-1. Boom! Just like that. That's Wooly, and that's driven to win on the front end here. Here comes Sparkler up and out of the outside. Magical GD towards the rail third. Sandals Dexter. Now he's left uncovered. Fourth to the outside. Following him fifth. Our first, the Falcon. Six up the rail. That is a Rich Camelot. Seven to the outside. Harmony P, the Triller. That's back from the past. 55 seconds flat for a half. That's 27 and 4 in a second. Driven to win, leading him up the back stretch. They're in three-quarter pool land now, and he's opening up on Sparkler second. Sandals Dexter got his work cut out now. He's racing at third. Fourth to the outside. Our first Falcon. Three-quarters track record time. 1:23 and 3. World-class driver, Willie Hennessy, and his horse driven to win. Nothing now. They're up against the clock. They're home and cold. Cup and Saucer, 46, driven to win, and Willie Hennessy all the way. Second is Sparkler. Sandals Dexter is third best tonight, and it looks like driving in for third. That was Rich Camelot with a super factor, driven to win.
You were a little pumped up there, Wally. Was that what you were doing? You know, you told us the story earlier in the night. Was that what you were doing in Fredericton that day on the final trip?
No, I actually in Fredericton. I was doing it during the race. The two races you showed tonight, I don't show emotion driving. And the two races you showed tonight were the two where I showed the most emotion ever in my life. You know, it was Elite Lap going across the wire. And there, I wasn't hitting that horse past the wire there. I was just kind of, you know, waving the whip, whatever.
Yeah.
But you've seen the crowd. You know it anyway, Greg, but anybody that's watching tonight, you see the crowd there. And it's just a pomp and everything all week, and the Gold Cup girls and the Gold Cup parade and everybody involved. And they involve everybody. You know, they involve the grooms, the owners, the horses. They just make everybody feel so special. And that's the last race of the week. And it's at midnight on Saturday night. It's the end of the old home week. And believe me, it's a show that Dean Hoffman said the greatest show in harness racing. Now, Dean Hoffman, he's been around harness racing 50, 60 years. And it's really something. I tell you what, I that's one race I get when I was driving in it, even there and whatever, I get pretty keyed up. Like once I hit the track, I'm all right. But before I go on the track, I don't know. I'm like, stay away from me. I get pretty keyed up. And, you know, I had the rail there. I had the best horse. He was by far the best horse. I had the rail, and the angle there going out of there showed kind of like horses were beating me out, but there was no shot anybody was. The only one that was getting to the front that night was one that was going to out-hoof me, because I wasn't letting anybody go, and I didn't have to. And I thank Scotty and Joe and Gwarches for getting me to go. And Billy Companion did the same thing for me a few years prior. It's completed my career. If I hadn't won that race somewhere in my career, that's something
would have been missing.
It would have. Oh, yeah. No, that's one of my main. That if not the main. Yeah.
That's a highlight. And Tony, have you ever been down to the Gold Cup and Saucer?
No, never been.
Sure you've heard about it.
We got asked a couple times to. Yeah, no, for sure. And 3-4 years ago, we had a couple pacers that were racing in the higher ranks at Yonkers and sort of taking them, but their owners didn't want to go, which was a shame. So maybe one day I'll go. Maybe not to race, but definitely to take on the experience.
Well, yeah, if you're a fan of racing, it's one that you should try and get to, as Wally said. I mean, Wally's been to all of the major dances throughout the world, and the one he really wanted to get back and win was the Gold Cup and Saucer. A real bread and butter horse for you, Tony. We just want to have a look at this guy as we get set to welcome the return of racing here, finally, in the province of Ontario. And one horse that we're going to see in for you on opening weekend is Ellis Park, and he's been a great old campaigner for you the last 3 years or so. What's he like as an individual? He looks like a massive horse out on the racetrack. Is he really that big, and what's he like around the barn?
Yeah, he's really that big. He's the size of a small elephant, really. His hind end is about 3.5 feet wide. Training him, if he goes anything faster than a quarter in about 35 seconds, he hits the footrests. He's he probably wears about a 63.5-inch hobble. I don't wear an overcheck on him, and he wears a pair of knee boots and tendon boots and a head pole inside. He's an absolute joy to train. They certainly don't make them like Ellis anymore. I mean, there's a horse Wally alluded earlier to. We push them so hard as 2- and 3-year-olds, and not as many aged horses around now. There's a horse that was bred by Dr. David Goodrow, and I didn't have him early in his career, but I don't believe he started at 2. He was lightly raced at 3, and up until this year, he'd never ever raced in the winter, and he's 11 years old. So, he's been well managed, well looked after. He's slowly grinded out 850 odd thousand, and I would say if it hadn't have been for the 2-month hiatus or 3-month hiatus that we've had from racing, he was probably a good chance to make $1 million, which was our aim with him. It'll be tough. He's a tough horse to keep going, especially when he's not racing, because he's so big, and he's got a few aches and pains in his old bones. But he's a wonderful horse to be around. His one quirk is he is absolutely terrified of tractors. He'll do everything he can to not go past them. I remember I was warming him up last year, I believe. Mohawk might have had something on Halloween night or Halloween time, and they had carriage rides or the pumpkin cart rides or something, and I was unlucky enough to be out there with Ellis for 2 laps, and believe me, when he takes a hold of you and shies away from anything, luckily he's got manners and he's extremely smart, because if he wanted to, he'd take you right through a brick wall, no problem. So yeah, just a joy to be around. It's a in some ways it's a little bit of a privilege to train a horse like that shows up every week, and when he's in the right spot now, he can still roll with the best of them.
Yeah, we tend to focus on the young stars, the horses that race on the Grand Circuit, but these old warriors like this are the kinds that they really endear themselves to you over a long period of time, and I think it's safe to say Ellis Park has done that, particularly on this circuit. And we're going to take a look back to a replay from May 26th, 2018. And over the course of his career, we've been used to seeing Ellis Park race primarily from off the pace, I would say. He's usually one that's closing at the end or grinding first over. But on this night, Chris Christoforou put him right on the front, and there was no beating him on this particular night. One of his best efforts. And let's take a look at that now, and we'll talk more about Ellis Park in a moment.
That sparkling qualifying victory, Maneri feels he's good to go. Here they come. They're often pacing Nirvana Sealster with good speed. Ellis Park right up on the accelerator early off the gate tonight as Christopher puts the hammer down with him, and it's Ellis Park out sprinting Nirvana Sealster under the line for the first time. A gap of 2 back to physically inclined. There with an early tuck went Fool Me Once. Sintra has one rival beaten off the gate, pole sitter American Virgin. He got away last as they charged their way to the quarter pole. On that early lead, it's Ellis Park. Ellis Park on top for Christopher for that first panel of 26 and 2, and as they travel to the backstretch, they will do so chasing the elder statesman of the field, Ellis Park. Slap of the wheel disc as Zeron came out of the pocket spot. Christopher says take a seat at 3/8. Ellis Park trying to go down the road tonight. Nirvana Sealster backs up to second. Right there from in third is Physically Inclined, and then Fool Me Once is fourth. Fifth in at the rail is Centra. He'll sit in. Overland from in sixth comes American Virgin now as the field is by the midway point. They're over there in 55-1 at 28-4 second quarter. Heading into the final turn here, Ellis Park up front, the lead a length and a half. Back into second is Nirvana Sealster. Right there from in third is Physically Inclined. Overland up into fourth, American Virgin. Buried at the rail from in fifth is Fool Me Once, and Sintra still on hold back in sixth. He pops to the outside to catch some cover now on the way to three quarters. They're chasing Ellis Park. He's a 2-length leader for Christophe Roux. Back into second, Nirvana Sealster. Overland to third, American Virgin. The rail fourth, Physically Inclined. Sintra sets up a wide rally. Three quarters in 1:23-4. Ellis Park on his game tonight. He's got 4 on the field. Sintra bearing down quickly on the outside, gobbling up racetrack late. Ellis Park is still there. Here's Sintra on the outside trying to get to him. Ellis Park at the inside, still clear by 3, and it's Ellis Park to come to the line, turning in a dazzling display tonight. Ellis Park by 2 lengths in 1:50-3 over the late rushing Sintra.
That was a couple of years ago at Mohawk Park, and Tony, he put away a very good field that night. Sintra, Physically Inclined, Nirvana Sealster. These are the hard hitters, the top older pacers in Canada, and he beat them pretty handily. Did you see that one coming on that night, him winning so impressively?
I think by memory, we had raced him off the pace a few starts in a row, and I don't give instructions to drivers. I mean, I try to, I worry about my horses, so I try to say don't abuse them. But I think on that particular night, Chris and I decided that the fact that Sintra was coming off a layoff and Alice was pretty sharp, it was a good night to put him on front. And I was pretty confident when he was on front. He was rolling along pretty good because he'd been racing really well. So, again, I mean, coming down to management on a horse like that, Chris has been driving him the majority of the time the last couple of years and has done a fantastic job with him, and burying him up when he needs to be and just letting him pace home, and then when the time's right, you can roll him pretty good. And always says he can leave whatever you want, and then he comes back to you 2 fingers. So class horse, and play the game with him, and when he's on, he's on.
Do you think he's the type, I think you alluded to it earlier, do you get the sense he's going to have to race himself back into shape with a few starts, whereas others might be ready to rock right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like he will. We had given him a break right before racing, and he was off a qualifier, and even then, I mean, it just goes to show, I think he qualified in 55 and paced home in 26 and a piece, and then his first start, he paced 51 home in 26 and a piece, and Chris never really asked him. So he was probably ready to go and in a class where he could probably win that start. But now he's such a big horse, and I really try not to work him too hard just because he is a little bit older, and it's a fine line having him fit and ready to go, and also keeping him sound and whatever. But I believe he'll probably take a couple starts. He is extremely sharp, though. Funny, a couple of weeks ago, I had trained him up quite decent on a Friday, and I gave him the weekend off. And Monday morning, we turned him out with his little 2-year-old filly girlfriend. And I'm not lying, you would have thought he was a black stallion. He reared up on both his legs and ran around for a good 5 minutes like he was 2 years old. And Wally said before, you've got to keep them happy, and he's the type of horse, when he's happy, he still bites a little bit and he digs for his food, and he's just a very cool horse with a personality. So as long as I keep him going okay and don't screw him up, I don't see any reason why he can't be productive for the next 6 or 9 months.
Really looking forward to seeing him back. Mongolian Hero, Ready to Rumble, a couple other real nice overnight horses you have in on opening weekend, I believe. Want to ask you just quickly before we wrap up tonight about a couple of the 3-year-olds you mentioned earlier. who qualified recently at Mohawk and qualified well. Unique Beach, lightly raced last year at 2. I think won as qualifier the other day. A thought on this one, a son of Some Beach Somewhere?
Yeah, obviously a little bit of an unknown. I'm really looking forward to racing him. He showed a lot of ability last year. He, like a lot of 2-year-olds, he ran into a little bit of soreness. We actually found he had a small chip in his left hind ankle, and we took that out and put him away. He was another one. I mean, he was kind of ready to go the middle of March. I wanted to get some races into him before this time and kind of figure out what he was. But he's well enough bred that we could have some fun with him this year. I mean, I'm not quite sure. Chris has come out and trained him a couple times through the spring. He's been happy with him. He's a big colt. He was a June foal, so maybe in disguise, this might be a blessing in disguise, him not racing early. But I'm quietly optimistic and looking forward to having some fun with him.
And Wine Rack Hanover, filly last year at 2, went 3 for 12. She made $233,000. Third in a recent qualifier for you. Now, Nifty Norman had the filly last year. Are you just going to be starting with her, or she moved to your barn for the season, or what's happening with her?
No, I believe the plan is to leave both her and She-Rock's camp with me for the summer. Nifty, it caught me by surprise, really. I mean, Nifty called me a few weeks ago and asked if we would be able to take them for him, and obviously, it's a no-brainer. But I think Nifty's just more worried about the crossing the border, the problems with the COVID-19, and he's extremely busy down there. So again, it's one of those things. It's Johnny on the spot, and I look forward to racing both of them. I was super impressed with Wine Rack's qualifier. I know she can be a little bit aggressive, so we're going to have to try and work on that. And Sylvan knows her, so I'm sure he'll figure it out. But really, really happy to get a filly of her caliber dropped off. And again, as long as I do my job and keep her happy and healthy and sound, then she'll probably do the rest, and hopefully we have a productive year.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. And we're gone over time, guys. We really appreciate you sticking it out with us for a couple of hours. It's just flown by. Just maybe a quick thought, Wally, before we wrap up tonight on your lineup. When do things officially get underway at Tioga, and how busy do you think you're going to be early on?
Yeah, actually they qualified today. This morning, and they qualified a couple of days ago, Monday, and the actual racing is going to start this Sunday, Monday. As far as my lineup, I feel the same right now going into the lineup. I don't know. I just hope I have horses to drive. I mean, I'm sure I'll have a few, but you never know. You just never know how that's going to happen. I'm just so happy that we're back going, and this here, Greg, you guys, what you guys have done here over this period of time, this very trying time for all of us, and this was just an avenue for us. I'm sure I speak for everybody that you, Curtis, doing the job he did. I don't know who else was in charge behind the scenes, but Greg, you've always do a great job. Very happy that you had me. I don't even know why you asked me again after I screwed up last time, but you did. The great job that Greg, you do a great job. The COVID pandemic, nothing else. I mean, I've known you a long time. Appreciate what you do for the business, and I'm just anxious to get going. I'm sure Tony is, and I'm sure everybody in the harness business is anxious to get going. And we're finally getting the chance to, guys. And even though we're going, it's still not the way we want it to be. We want it to be back to where it was with the fans there, and hopefully more fans. Maybe they'll be hungry for something like us again, and they'll appreciate us like they should.
Absolutely. Well said. Just before we wrap up, let's recap our trivia questions and that poll question tonight. See how everybody did. We'll start with the poll question. Which of these races would be the top of your bucket list if you haven't already seen it? And the Hamiltonian comes in first narrowly, 43% over the Elite Lop. The Prix d'Amérique with 5% of the respondents, and 14% said something other than one of those three races. Thank you again for taking part in the poll question tonight. Here's a recap of the trivia questions. First one, wanted to know which mare that Tony trained to back-to-back second-place finishes in the Breeders' Crown Mare's Pace, and her name was Drop the Ball. And she had a couple of stints in the Tony stable when racing here north of the border, and finished second 2 consecutive years in the Breeders' Crown. And she has a nice filly that is racing and coming back this year by the name of New Year that we'll be keeping an eye on. In 2001, Wally teamed up with a pacer named Scarlet and Gold to capture which special race? Of course, it was the Gold Cup and Saucer. We showed you his second win in that famed race with Driven to Win back in 2005. But Wally scored his first Gold Cup victory in 2001 with Scarlet and Gold. And our final trivia question, wanting to know where Wally sits on the all-time driving list. With 10,491 wins to his credit so far, he sits 13th all-time. And a couple of the names just above him on that list, George Brennan, and none other than John Campbell, who Wally said earlier tonight was the greatest driver of all time, and probably wouldn't get any argument with that. A couple of other quick stats on Wally. He's a member as well of the Prince Edward Island Sports Hall of Fame. And back in 1992, how about this night? He won 7 New York Sire Stake races on a single card at Buffalo Raceway in 1992. And he was certainly known as the king of the New York Sire Stakes, the king of Pompano for many years as well, and a great guy. Tony O'Sullivan, a great guy as well. And fellas, want to thank you again so much for joining us tonight. It's been a lot of fun, and want to wish you both the best of luck getting back to the racetrack this weekend.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg, for having us on. Thanks for having me. And
the Central Ontario Standardbred Association, proudly serving Ontario horse people with integrity and accountability. Collaborative, supportive, helping to ensure a vibrant harness racing industry. Lifetime membership is free, and there are many benefits. Become a new member today. COSA, representing the interests of horse people racing at Ontario racetracks. To find out more, visit COSAonline.com.